The year is 1683. Across the Hungarian plains, the ground shudders beneath the movement of empire. 150,000 soldiers march westward, their columns stretching so far across the land that a man standing at a fixed point would wait 3 full hours before the last rank disappeared past him. The crescent banners of the Ottoman Sultan darken the summer sky like a second horizon. Leading this force is Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, commander of the most feared military apparatus on earth. He has cut a path of conquest through the Balkans, leaving occupied cities smoldering behind him. Now he fixes his gaze on Vienna, what the Ottomans call the golden apple of Europe. If Vienna falls, Germany lies open. If Vienna falls, Italy trembles. If Vienna falls, the fractured kingdoms of Christendom collapse like stones toppled one by one. The Sultan has pledged Mustafa the golden apple, the ancient emblem of dominion over the world. And Europe, watching, does exactly nothing. The Holy Roman Empire is divided by politics and pride. Its emperor has already abandoned the city. France looks on from a careful distance, unwilling to strengthen a rival. The Italian states are consumed by their own quarrels. Catholics and Protestants still carry the wounds of wars that had torn the continent apart for generations. The great powers see only their own immediate interests. None of them see the void opening beneath their feet. One man sees it clearly. King Jan III Sobieski of Poland, 60 years old, a soldier from his earliest years, a veteran of 30 engagements against Turk and Tatar alike. A man whose faith is not a comfort but a command. Where others find cause for despair, he finds obligation. Where others encounter mathematics that cannot be overcome, he encounters a moment that transcends mathematics. His kingdom is depleted. His treasury is thin. His available forces number only in the thousands. None of that changes what he understands he must do. He sends word south to Vienna. Hold. I am coming. He does not wait for promises of payment or political guarantees. He assembles every man capable of riding and begins what will become the longest forced march in Polish history. Because Sobieski grasps something that cautious commanders tend to overlook, that certain moments in history do not suspend themselves while men calculate the odds. That when civilization teeters at the edge, the men worth remembering do not weigh the cost. They simply pay it. Inside Vienna, time is measured in heartbeats and prayers. The Ottoman siege engines work without pause, cannons hammering at aging stonework, miners digging beneath the bastions and detonating charges that collapse whole sections of wall in eruptions of earth and smoke. The defenders fight for every yard of rampart, every remaining hour of daylight. Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg commands the garrison with iron steadiness. He understands the arithmetic of the situation perfectly, and he refuses to act on it. Each morning he climbs to the walls and counts the new breaches. Each morning there are more. 3 massive gaps have been blown in the outer defenses. His fighting force has dwindled to 4,000 men. They have held for 2 months and cannot hold much longer. He writes in his journal, "We are living ghosts defending a tomb, yet we will not yield." Kara Mustafa, meanwhile, reclines in his silk pavilion and dines on lamb and honey while Vienna starves. He has built a city of canvas so vast, it takes an hour to walk end to end. He receives foreign envoys who arrive to observe the siege as spectacle. There is no urgency in him. Time and famine are his instruments, and both are working. His officers urge a direct assault. Mustafa declines. Why spend soldiers when hunger will open the gates? He does not look north. It does not occur to him that anyone would genuinely attempt to challenge him here. Inside the city, the truth is brutal. Smoke hangs over Vienna like a permanent shroud. The streets are quiet except for the sound of distant guns and wounded men. Food runs low, then lower, then nearly gone. People boil leather for broth. Rats become something coveted. The oldest and youngest die not from Ottoman steel, but from starvation. Water grows scarce. Disease moves through the alleys. Civilians dig alongside soldiers. Old men stand watch. Boys carry stone to fill the breaches. Women load muskets without shaking. On the night of September 9th, Starhemberg sends his final courier through enemy lines. The message is brief: come now or do not come at all. We have days, perhaps only hours. 2 nights later, a sentry claims to have spotted signal fires on the distant hills. Another says he heard trumpets carried on the mountain wind. The people of Vienna press against their crumbling walls and search the northern darkness with their eyes. And there, before first light on September 11th, they see it. Banners cresting the hills of Kallenberg. Thousands of them. The double-headed eagle of the empire. The white eagle of Poland. The relief force has arrived. The march south had been a prayer composed in iron and willpower. Sobieski had driven his men across 500 miles of rough country, through Carpathian passes where summer storms turned trails into rivers of mud, through forests so dense that daylight vanished for days, across rivers running high and dangerous from rain. They moved faster than any army had a reasonable right to move. 40 miles on favorable days, 50 when desperation required it. They slept on horseback. They ate on horseback. Because Vienna was dying, and every passing hour carried a price. At the vanguard rode the Hussars. The winged Hussars, already myth while they still breathed. Knights armored head to foot in plate that caught light like polished mirrors, with great wooden frames rising from their backs bearing wings of eagle feathers swept upward and outward. The wings were not ornament. They were a psychological weapon refined across generations of warfare, making each rider appear larger than human, drawn from some older and more terrible world. And the sound when 3,000 of them charged together, an eerie building whistle that rose into a roar, the last sound many enemies had ever registered. Each Hussar carried an 18-foot lance of hollow timber, light enough to brace beneath one arm, stiff enough to drive through a man and the horse he rode. They were landed nobility. They owned estates, held titles, commanded servants. Any one of them could have remained home in comfort. They rode to Vienna regardless, because their king called, because honor left no alternative, because there are things that matter more than personal safety, and they had been raised to know which things those are. They were the last true knights of an older Europe, and they understood it. At Tulln, Sobieski joined Duke Charles of Lorraine and the imperial forces. Poles and Austrians who held no particular warmth for each other stood shoulder to shoulder. Catholic and Protestant soldiers, who in another season would have been enemies, looked at one another and found something they shared. Because if Vienna fell, the distinctions between them would mean nothing. Old resentments dissolved in the cold mountain air. Nothing remained except the charge that was coming. On the night of September 11th, the Allied army settled into the Vienna woods without fires and without sound above a whisper. At dawn on September 12th, the commanders climbed to the summit of Kahlenberg. What they saw below took the breath from their lungs. 80,000 Ottoman soldiers in ordered formation. Tens of thousands of cavalry in reserve. Artillery parks gleaming with bronze guns. 27,000 against 80,000 of the finest soldiers the Ottoman Empire could field. A younger commander might have hesitated. Sobieski turned to his officers. His voice carried the weight of absolute calm. "Gentlemen, we attack at noon. The Hussars will lead. Make your peace with God." Across the Allied lines, men knelt in prayer. Catholic priests moved among the soldiers with blessings. Protestant chaplains led quiet hymns. For one morning there was no division between them, only men facing a shadow that distinguished between none of them. The Hussars checked their equipment in silence, tested lance balance, spoke quietly to their horses. Some wrote brief letters home. Others simply breathed the morning air, as though committing it to memory. At 11 o'clock, the descent began. Infantry led, engaging Ottoman skirmishers on the lower slopes. German cavalry hammered at the flanks. Austrian forces pressed from the south. Progress was being made, but not fast enough. Vienna could not wait. Inside the walls, the garrison had thrown itself against the siege lines in one final desperate push. If the cavalry did not break through within hours, the city would fall regardless of what was unfolding on the hillside. At the crest of a low ridge, Sobieski sat his war horse. Behind him, 3,000 Hussars had formed into a single massive wedge. 3,000 lances lowered as one. His sons rode at his flanks, Alexander and James, their expressions set with the composure of men who had accepted what the afternoon might require of them. The king raised his saber. The blade caught the sun. The thunder began. At noon on September 12, 1683, 3,000 winged Hussars launched from that ridge. They moved from trot to canter to full gallop, the rhythm building, the ground carrying their vibration for miles in every direction. The feathered wings caught the wind and screamed, a sound like 1,000 eagles descending at once. 18,000 Allied cavalry followed in their wake. But it was the Hussars the Ottomans saw first. A wall of steel and motion pouring down the slope, wings blazing in the afternoon light. The Ottoman cavalry moved to intercept. Thousands of Sipahi riders, veterans of 100 campaigns, the finest horsemen the East could produce. They had never faced the winged Hussars before. They lasted 4 minutes. The Polish wedge struck the Ottoman line with an impact audible from the walls of Vienna. Lances shattered. Men were hurled from saddles, and the Hussars did not slow. They drove through the first rank, discarded their broken lances, drew sabers, and kept moving. Behind them the breach widened. Units that had never retreated began to crack. The Janissaries tried to form defensive squares. The Hussars rode through them like scythes through grain. Kara Mustafa watched his army collapse from his pavilion. The man who had promised the Sultan the conquest of Europe stood motionless as the nightmare became total, then fled, abandoning his treasure, his maps, his personal banner, and the golden apple meant for the Sultan's hand. By nightfall, 15,000 Ottoman soldiers lay dead on the field. The remainder fled south in complete disorder. The greatest army the Sultan had ever assembled had been broken in a single afternoon by a force one-third its size. At sunset, Sobieski rode through the gates of Vienna. The streets were lined with hollow-eyed figures, gaunt from starvation, diminished by disease, who wept and reached out to touch his horse. The king dismounted in the cathedral square, knelt before the altar of St. Stephen's Cathedral, and spoke the words that would follow him through history. Veni, vidi, Deus visit. I came. I saw. God conquered. Not we conquered. Not I conquered. God conquered. Because Sobieski understood what victory can cause men to forget, that courage is borrowed from something beyond flesh, and that when the impossible becomes possible, it does not happen by human hands alone. The Ottoman advance into the heart of Europe was finished. The tide of history, which had seemed fixed and unstoppable just days before, had turned on a single September afternoon. And the sound that turned it was thunder, the thunder of hooves on a mountainside, the thunder of wings in the wind, the thunder of men who refused, against every calculation, to let the darkness win.